Hi, I'm Cindy from the Copper Torch, and this is my new DeWalt 7485 table saw. I want to show you how I turn this table saw into this 80-inch by 49-inch custom mobile workbench with locking casters. It can be built by one person and has a built-in table saw, bottom shelf, and reserved area for a built-in router. The surface area is large enough for almost a full sheet of plywood when the blade is lowered. So let's get started. To start with, we'll make the frames. The great thing about making your own furniture is that you can custom fit the size of the piece to the area where it will reside, and you can determine the dimensions of your workbench by the tabletop. Lay the top face down on the floor with something under it to protect the surface. You'll be building your workbench upside down to start with. I'm using melamine, so the width is 49 inches instead of the usual 48, and 97 inches long instead of 96. The total finished workbench dimensions will be 36 inches high, 49 inches wide, and 80 inches long. There will be a 3-inch overhang on 3 sides to allow for clamping or even to store your clamps when not in use. To make the frames for your workbench, cut 2 2x4s, each 74 inches long, and 2 2x4s, each 43 inches long. Using a Craig pocket hole jag, make pocket holes every 8 inches in each piece. Go ahead and cut 4 more of the same, but without pocket holes. I should add, Craig is not a sponsor, nor have I accepted anything from them. Place one set of frames on the inverted tabletop 3 inches from the edges, except the end where the table saw will be inserted. Lay the sides with pocket holes toward the inside and butt up against runners already in place. These rails will be just below the top of the table when it's flipped. Next, we'll make the legs. To measure the length to cut the legs, start with 36 inches being the distance from the floor to the top of the table. Subtract 4 inches for the caster, 3.5 inches for sliding each end, and 3/4 inches for the width of the tabletop. Using the T-track and adjustable block, set the length to 27 3/4 inches and cut 12 pieces from 2x4 lumber. I really love this concept. You have the strength of 4x4 lumber without the cost or the weight. Plus, sliding each piece makes a shelf for the frames without having to cut notches. To make the 6 legs, place one piece on another and slide each 3.5 inches. Use scrap 2x4 blocks as spacers at the ends and perpendicular to the legs. This is where the 3.5 inch comes in, where I said it would be explained later. Glue, clamp each end, brad nail several times, countersink 3 pilot holes, and secure with 2.5 inch screws. Repeat for other 5 legs. Place each leg as pictured, being 17 inches apart at the table saw end. Attach the legs to the rails with 4 screws on each, making sure each leg is squared. That completes the frame, which will be just below the top of the table. Now use the other 4 rails and attach at the opposite end of the legs. Do not attach this frame to the underside of the countertop yet, using the pocket holes. Now we'll add the 4 locking casters. Make 4 pilot holes and attach the casters using the included screws into the ends of the 4 outside legs. Now we'll set the workbench upright. Standing in the center facing out, lift the rail and pull toward you until a set of casters is touching the melamine. Then let the casters slide the table away from you, carefully stepping over the rails, and set the entire workbench upright. Lock the casters. Now we'll add 4 cross members to the bottom shelf. Cut 4 cross members which will go under the bottom shelf to reinforce it and the outside rails. Measure the distance snugly between the bottom rails and cut 4 cross members from 2x4s. Nail in place, then secure with 2 screws in each end. Now we'll add 3 cross members to the countertop. Repeat cross members for top rails, only cutting 3. Finish with a honeycombed offset effect. If you're planning any built-ins in the tabletop, such as a router, plan for the opening now. Now we're going to make the bottom shelf. You can use 3/4 inch plywood, but I used 1/2 for the bottom since there is already a lot of support. The easiest way to measure is to lay the plywood on top of the workbench and scribe the legs, keeping in mind that the rails on the top are on the outside while the rails on the bottom are on the inside. Check your marked cutouts by measuring all distance where the bottom will go. Cut and place, drill pilot holes, and insert screws every 8 inches or so. Now we'll add the countertop and secure it. Unlock the casters and roll the workbench off the melamine. Then place the melamine on the top of the workbench and lock the rollers. This can be done by one person with a lot of tipping, leaning, pulling, and dragging, but if you've got the help, go ahead and use it. Line up the edges evenly where the table saw will be installed. All of their sides should have a 3-inch overhang. Pull the top down with clamps and attach with pocket hole joinery from underneath. If you don't want to attach this way, you can use some small blocks at the corners. Glue the sides of the blocks, which will touch the underside of the countertop and sides of the workbench, and clamp them until dried, which will still keep the top in place. Making the H-frame platform. Now we're going to make the platform for the table saw so we can insert it into the workbench. The platform is merely an H, measured and assembled as pictured. To position and attach the H-frame, place the table saw on top of the workbench and lay a level across the top of the saw and extend it past the edge of the saw. Measure the distance from the top of the workbench surface to the bottom edge of the level and add 3/4 of an inch for the melamine tray thickness. On mine, it was a total of 13¼ inches. Measure the same distance from the top of the workbench down each of the 4 legs at the saw end of the bench. Mark a line on each of these 4 legs and position the top edge of the H-frame on these lines and attach each one with 1 screw for easier adjusting later. Add more support to the platform by cutting 2 2x4s and inserting 2 pocket holes with a Craig pocket hole jig at the bottoms and tops of each facing in. For now, just place the 2x4s. These will be attached after the table saw opening has been marked, which is the next step. The 2x4's location will be marked then. Now we're going to mark and cut the opening for the table saw. Measure the table saw face at the widest part. The DeWalt 7485 measured 23 inches, but add 1/4 to that. Measure the table saw face at the deepest part, vertically. The DeWalt 7485 measured 19½ inches to the top end, plus another 3 inches to make a channel for the fence to travel in. Continue the vertical line down the face of the frame. Secure the 2x4s which were left in place in the earlier step. Attach as close to the vertical lines as possible. Transfer the measurements to the countertop. Make the markings on frog tape, especially if you're cutting melamine, which can chip. The next step is to cut out all the X-marked area from the workbench top. Set your circular saw to a depth just deep enough to clear the 3/4 inch countertop. As marked, cut B almost to the corner, then finish with a jigsaw. Then cut A to B and C to B, keeping a good grip, as this piece will drop. These 2 last cuts will become the platform. Make cuts D and E. The next step is to remove a section of the front frame just below the countertop to make the opening for the saw, now that the extra supports are attached. Make these 2 cuts with a handsaw. Take the square melamine piece you just cut out from the tabletop and move it down to the H-frame to serve as a platform for the saw, and attach that to the top of the H-frame, aligning the front edge of the melamine with the H-frame. Attach with brad nails. We're almost finished. Now we're going to insert the table saw by placing it on the platform. Insert the table saw into the opening you just created. If the top of the saw isn't flush with the rest of the workbench, just take it back out and you can easily adjust the H-frame since there is only one screw in each leg at this point. When you get it where you want it, go back and add another screw to the H-frame in each of the 4 legs. Now we're going to finish the edges. Melamine leaves a really ugly edge, so let your first job using the table saw be to cut some lengths off any 1x material into 1/4 inch strips and glue them to the outside edges of the countertop. Then secure them with brad nails. Round them off with a sander. You won't be able to reach the horizontal cuts you just made to remove the melamine platform, but you can glue on some veneer tape and it'll look fine. In summary, I watched several YouTube videos and used parts of 3 to make my workbench. Griffith Woodworking for the H-frame, DIY Woodholic for the sliding legs, and Dave Stanton for his excellent video on the Craig pocket hole jig. So, thanks to all of them. I'll post materials and costs on the last screen. Thanks for looking. I hope it was enjoyable and somewhat informative.